Right now, we're going to take a look at the All-22, as we do each week, with Josh Paunil here from PhillyMag.com, Birds 24/7. As we don't know where to start, Josh. Everyone's winning hardware on this team.
Yeah, I mean, Carson Wentz, NFL Rookie of the Month, Fletcher Cox, NFC Defensive Player of the Month. I mean, the Eagles really couldn't have gotten off to a much better start in the first few weeks of the season.
No, but, let's look at the defense, because I think the defense has been almost more dominating. And Fletcher Cox, I was a little surprised to see that he won that award. So what are some of the things you see from him that make you say, you know what, this guy deserved this award?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously he's played well just against Pittsburgh alone. 5 tackles, 2 sacks, a forced fumble, 5 total pressures. I mean, he's just a guy that really gave David DeCastro, Pittsburgh's right guard, and that's a Pro Bowl All-Pro guy that Pittsburgh's got at right guard. Really blew him up several times throughout the game. But it's funny you mentioned that, because I actually think Brandon Graham, he may have been more deserving of that award. Now, obviously, Fletcher Cox has played well throughout the first 2 games, particularly against Pittsburgh, but Brandon Graham has been playing just as well, if not a little bit better. I mean, I can't believe how well he's been playing to start off this season. It's funny because part of the reason Fletcher Cox played so well against Pittsburgh, outside of how talented he is, obviously, is because of how much attention the Steelers paid to Brandon Graham. I mean, I thought it was funny because on one play alone, the Steelers had both their tight end and their running back hit Brandon Graham before they went out on their routes to help the right tackle. They had 3 guys hit him on one play because they were so worried about his pass rush, giving Fletcher Cox a little more one-on-one opportunities. So Fletcher Cox obviously playing very well, but Brandon Graham coming off the edge, both against the run and the pass, playing at a very high level right now.
Now some people might surmise that Brandon Graham's playing so well because of all the attention Fletcher Cox gets, but is that not one of the main reasons why Brandon Graham is excelling, that he's kind of doing a lot of this on his own, or does Fletcher have something to do with that?
Well, I think it's worked both ways. I think particularly early on, teams were really concerned about Fletcher Cox. I mean, what he can do against your interior offensive line. Like going back to the Browns week 1, I mean, that was a huge emphasis for them. Now, obviously, the Browns probably could have done a better job against Fletcher Cox, but that was one of the big points of emphasis in their game plan leading up. And so that definitely helped Brandon Graham coming off the edge, bending around and getting some pressure on the quarterback. But it's kind of flipped now, because when you have the Steelers, I mean, in the Steelers' opening drive, they passed the ball 6 times. 4 times, they had the running back or tight end chip Brandon Graham before going out on a route, which is a very, very high percentage of plays to do such a thing. I mean, that's not something that you see very often. And the 5th play was a screen pass, so you're obviously not going to chip him there. And the 6th play was actually a fake chip, which I'm not sure I've even seen before. The tight end, pretending that he's going to go chip Brandon Graham, then goes out on a route. So I'd say early on, Brandon Graham definitely benefited from all the interior attention Fletcher Cox got and the double team Fletcher Cox commanded. But against Pittsburgh, Fletcher Cox was actually one of the guys that benefited not just from Brandon Graham getting extra attention, but even other guys, whether it was Benny Logan or Connor Barwin or Vinny Curry. A lot of guys command double teams on the Eagles' defensive line, which is why they've been so successful.
Yeah, and, Vinny Curry, as you just mentioned, hasn't really even got going yet. I mean, and you wonder if you're seeing anything as to why. I mean, are they putting more attention to him, or has he just got off to a slow start?
That's a good question. Honestly, I think it's just you have your other defensive ends playing at such a high level. I mean, I don't think you can take Brandon Graham off the field right now. Honestly, I think Brandon Graham right now should be getting more snaps than Connor Barwin. Now, it's not a huge difference, so that's really kind of nitpicking. But Brandon Graham is playing at a very high level, and you don't really want to take him off the field too much right now. And then Connor Barwin on the other side, he's just been consistent for you, both against the run and the pass. I know his numbers aren't, they don't really stand out to you. They aren't very gaudy. But, on the film, talking to the team, the players and coaches, they're happy with Connor Barwin's start so far. At first, I thought it might have been Vinny Curry. He was dealing with a minor injury going into the season in the first couple of weeks. But I thought that was the reason he wasn't playing as much, about 45% of the snaps, I believe. But at this point, I think it's just you have Brandon Graham playing so well. Connor Barwin, who the coaches and Chip Schwartz really love. It's not necessarily that Vinny Curry's not playing well. It's just you have a lot of other guys playing at a high level. And although you just gave Vinny Curry that big contract, it's a nice problem to have when you're trying to spread out snaps between three different guys who are giving you a lot off the edge.
Hey, Josh, watching the game at home, Malcolm Jenkins looked like he was everywhere, all over the field. Is that what the tape showed as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was phenomenal. I mean, Malcolm Jenkins, we're talking about how well Brandon Graham and Fletcher Cox have been playing, but Malcolm Jenkins, particularly against Pittsburgh, was just outstanding. He had two pass breakups just against Antonio Brown alone, one on that big fourth down play, almost an interception. I mean, just the way he's seeing the field and how quickly he can diagnose these routes coming. I mean, especially on that fourth down play, I think Malcolm Jenkins lined up maybe 15 yards off the ball. I mean, about 2 yards into Antonio Brown's route, Malcolm Jenkins could see the shallow dig coming across the field and almost beat him to the spot where Ben Roethlisberger was throwing the ball. He ended the game with 3 pass breakups. He did a good job of tackling the open field. He broke up a screen play for just a yard or two. So Malcolm Jenkins, I mean, he should be in the conversation. When we're talking about the top defensive players on the Eagles right now, Malcolm Jenkins should absolutely be in that conversation.
And then when you look at guys in the secondary, Nolan Carroll showed flashes of Deion Sanders out there. How good was he?
He was everywhere, man.
Yeah, and that was something that I was actually a little bit surprised to see because coming into the season, I thought Nolan Carroll would just be a solid, consistent guy for the Eagles. In the first 2 games, I think even Nolan Carroll would admit he didn't play that well against Cleveland and against Chicago. But I thought he really stepped up against Pittsburgh. He had a few pass breakups like Malcolm Jenkins did. He was very physical at the line of scrimmage. I mean, there's one play where he's up against Sammy Coates, and he just, destroys him at the line of scrimmage and doesn't even really allow Sammy Coates to run his route because he's just too physical with him. He had another play where he recognized a fake bubble screen, and he dropped back about 10 to 15 yards quickly enough to get his hand on the ball and break up the pass. So he was a guy that I thought really stepped up and was among the cornerbacks kind of the unsung hero because, Antonio Brown had, about 140 passing yards, which isn't a bad day for him. But Ben Roethlisberger only had about 250 total passing yards, and he threw the ball 44 times, which if you're the Eagles, you're very happy with how your defensive backs played that.
How about Rodney McLeod? It seems like we don't hear his name as much.
Yeah, and he's a guy that, you saw this on the film in St. Louis, but you're really seeing it in Philadelphia snap after snap in each game is how rangy he is and how he can cover the field sideline to sideline. If you just look at that interception he had near the end of the game, the fourth quarter, I think it might have been against Antonio Brown or whoever that Steelers receiver was, just how much field he covered just to get to the ball. And then when he actually made the play, after looking at the replay, I'm still not sure how he came down with that interception, but he really made it easier for Jim Schwartz to kind of shade Malcolm Jenkins closer to Antonio Brown, because when you shade Malcolm Jenkins, obviously Rodney McLeod has to cover more of the field, but when you have a guy who has such range and can cover sideline to sideline, Jim Schwartz isn't as worried about that.
Talking with Josh Paunil here, PhillyMag.com. Birds 24/7 as he likes to break down that All-22. He goes frame by frame, picks out plays in the course of that game. Off of the All-22 real fast, when Leotis McKelvin is ready to come back, and many people think that could be Detroit, how does he fit in? What does that change in the secondary?
I don't think it changes too much. They're not going to change. They haven't really changed the scheme or any of the concepts they've been employing too much with Jalen Mills and Ron Burke at that outside cornerback position opposite Nolan Carroll. But as you mentioned, Nolan Carroll, and not just Nolan Carroll, actually everybody, Zach Ertz, Nolan Carroll, Isaac Seumalo, everybody who is hurt for the Eagles is expected to be available for the Detroit game. But it really shouldn't change much. I think really all it does is it improves your cornerback play. Jalen Mills has shown some flashes. And I think he's improved both against Chicago and Pittsburgh as the games went along. It was more physical at the line of scrimmage and press coverage. but Leonis McKelvin will give you more consistent play, obviously, as the number one quarterback on the depth chart.
All right, that's the defensive side of the ball, which, Josh, they're exceeding everyone's. I think a lot of people figured they would be, and I even used the word significant. I thought they would be significantly better on defense than they were last year for a couple of reasons. They wouldn't be on the field as much. They have better talent and probably a better coordinator. But that being said, they are significantly better than I thought, and I thought they'd be significantly better.
Yeah, this is a defense that they've given up less than 7 points per game, which is crazy. The whole team has given up 27 points over the 3 games. Obviously, one of those, 7 of those points being a touchdown. So the fact that your defense doesn't even give up 7 points per game, you should be able to win almost every game you play, no matter who your quarterback is, who's on the offense. If you're giving up that few number of points every game, like me and you could be on the Eagles right now on the starting offensive unit, and we would go out there and win games with this defense.
To further your point, Mike, you look at some of those numbers, 9 points allowed in points per game, that's first. 274.3 in yards per game, that's fourth. Tied for third in the league in sacks, 10 a game, takeaways, 6. Josh, the numbers are just flying off the charts.
By the way, I played running back when I was younger, but now I'd have to learn how to play guard, I think.
Yeah.
Right? I think I'm more of a guard-shaped man than so that's to learn in a new position. But
I
Josh thinks we could still win. Although PT was playing guard, we'd probably still be able to run right behind you there, PT.
Well, they couldn't find Sproles behind me. I know that.
Josh Paunil's with us here, taking a look on the All-22. Let's go over to the offense now, because obviously Wentz gets a lot of the accolades. But, I do want to talk about some of the guys around him. But give me something that when you do these All-22s, you pick out something that, obviously catches your eye, that's something that you want to really break down further. Give us something on Wentz that stood out this time.
Oh, that's a good question. I feel like there's been so much attention to so many facets of his game. I think it really just comes down to how well he is, how well he performs under pressure. There are so many stats that, his passer rating over the 3 games so far is 119 against the blitz, which is off the charts. But that's something that even when you watch the film is even more impressive. Even when he's not blitzed, like that Sproles 73-yard touchdown play, how well he throws the ball on the move, how well he keeps his eyes down the field. He seems to have a natural feel for, okay, I need to get out of the pocket, but I don't need to throw the ball away yet. I don't need to cross the line of scrimmage and run the ball. On that play when Carson Wentz, rolled out of the pocket to the right and escaped that pressure and found Darren Sproles along the right sideline, a lot of quarterbacks would run the ball. He probably could have gotten 5 yards easy and split or, done something like that. But I think just the fact of how well he sees the field on the move, the natural feel for the game that he has, and then also the touch. I think that would probably be the one thing that maybe people don't talk about enough, and it doesn't really isn't reflected in the box score, the touch that he has on his passes. On that throw to Darren Sproles, he had a nice touch pass to Brett Selleck. I want to say it was about 25-yard gain. Even that 41-yard pass to Dorial Green-Beckham, that drop touchdown pass, beautiful touch on the ball, which is something that, to be honest with you can't really teach that. That's something a quarterback either has or he doesn't. And Carson Wentz has it, and he's been showing it in every game, really in almost every situation.
Josh, Mike and I talked about that earlier in the week about the touch on his passes, and we used a baseball analogy that if the pitcher just had a fastball that, anybody could just throw heaters right down the middle, and in the NFL, quarterbacks that can throw the ball hard or with good arm speed, a.k.a. a Jay Cutler, but it's almost like he has the fastball, the changeup, the curveball, the slider. He's got all these weapons in his repertoire, and then we spoke to Peter King earlier, and he said it was like he could see that yellow line on the field on that Sproles play, like he knew he wasn't going to cross that line.
Yeah, and I think that baseball analogy is a really good one, because there are a lot of situations where you have to fit the ball over a linebacker, but you can't throw it too far because you have the safety behind the receiver. And the Eagles run a lot of high-low concepts, meaning, they'll have, a couple of receivers, one going on a short route, one going over the middle, one going deep, kind of along the same plane, really just to make the defenders pick and choose. All right, am I going to step up, step back? Who am I going to cover? And Carson Wentz has done a really good job of fitting the ball into those tight windows where you have to get just enough touch to go over a linebacker or maybe even someone in the secondary, but you can't get too much air under the ball because maybe someone else behind the receiver can make a play either to break up the pass or intercept it. So that baseball analogy is perfect because if you just throw a bullet every time, then you're going to throw a lot of interceptions in this league.
Yeah, and, the interesting part will be when moving forward here, Wentz has played really well, but the line has played really well. That's going to change a little bit, we assume, going into next week. How do you think, looking at that offensive line, things will be affected by Lane Johnson being out?
Yeah, we've talked about how surprising Doug Peterson has been as a head coach and a play caller, how surprising Carson Wentz has been as a rookie quarterback. But this offensive line almost ranks as high as those two guys in terms of their surprising success early on. Obviously, Jason Peters staying healthy has had a lot to do with it. But Lane Johnson and Alan Barber have both played at an extremely high level. I don't think you can really understate how well those two guys are playing. But with Alan Barber moving from left guard to right tackle, assuming Lane Johnson's suspension is upheld and he loses his appeal at the beginning of next week, you're going to see some type of drop-off, particularly from Alan Barber. And I still think Alan Barber will be solid at right tackle. I don't think he'll be a liability. I think he's a guy that you can still rely on. But he's going from the position that he's most comfortable at, left guard, to the position that he's least comfortable at with right tackle. And then you're sticking, most likely it's going to be Stefan Wisniewski at left guard. He's a veteran guy that started 77 games. But his background is primarily as a center and not as a guard. So you're going to have a little bit of adjustment period in terms of the chemistry and communication with a guy who's obviously not just new to the Eagles, but new to starting at left guard game in and game out. So I still think this unit is going to be good up front for the Eagles, but it's definitely going to be a drop-off when you have Lane Johnson sitting out those 10 games.
Hey, when you do these All-22s, you look a lot at the players, but just the play designs and the play callings and how Peterson seemingly gets matchups in his favor more often than not. I thought the play, which, just was so wide open, was Jordan Matthews catching that first touchdown pass. It's just a simple slant, it seems like, but it seemed like there was so much more to that play if you look at it from above that really stands out and kind of illustrates how Peterson has done such a good job in not just play calling, Josh, but play designing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that's a great point because really what made that touchdown pass, obviously Carson Wentz, good ball placement, a nice route by Jordan Matthews. I believe those Brett Selleck that ran that just straight clear-out route, just going, that seam route right up the middle, taking the safety out of the play and kind of obstructing the cornerback that's trailing Jordan Matthews over the middle. So you have Doug Peterson just doing a very, very good job of putting his guys in positions to be successful, and especially he's pulling out the right plays at the right time. It's not like he's kind of taken the opposite of the Chip approach. Obviously, Chip, he would just run things over and over and over again, and you'd be able to adjust to them. But Doug, he has enough varied concepts. Obviously, there's some similarities, and he has his tendencies, but he's done a really good job of just pulling things out at the right time. That touchdown pass is a good example because although Carson Wentz made a good throw, although Jordan Matthews ran a good route, that's a play that most wide receivers would get open on and most quarterbacks would be able to throw the touchdown pass on, and that's a tribute to Doug Peterson's play calling and play designing.
Yeah, and how's he going to design the plays when Ertz is back? Because in my opinion, I think Ertz might be, in this offense with Wentz's skill set, might be the most dangerous weapon they have. And you add him to Burton, who I think has also been, a surprise. He had the drop the other night, but, he's still a very athletic tight end. And Selleck has been a factor. I'm wondering how he's going to design plays. I don't think it's going to be like Chip Kelly, just holding three fingers up and three tight ends will go in the game. I think it might be a little bit more, illustrated better than that when he has all three of those weapons at his disposal.
Yeah, and the nice thing for the Eagles is that these are three guys with varied skill sets. It's not like all three of them are strictly pass catchers or all three of them are strictly run blockers. Trey Burton still has room to grow as a blocker, and even Zach Ertz probably isn't satisfied quite with where he's at in terms of blocking, although he has made significant strides. But these are all guys that bring different things. Trey Burton is obviously the most athletic. Zach Ertz is just probably the best receiving option with the way he runs his routes. And obviously his hands. I mean, that one-handed grab he had against Cleveland on the opening drive is a perfect illustration of what's going to make him a dangerous threat in the red zone. When you have a guy with his size, his athleticism, his catching ability. We talked a lot about DGB, and Dorial Green-Beckham will get more involved in the offense as time goes on. But at least immediately, I think Zach Ertz is going to be the big red zone threat. And then you have Brent Selleck. I mean, just how physical he is, how well he finishes off his runs. He's a guy that's probably not going to run those deep over routes like a Zach Ertz would, or he's not going to run maybe those 10 to 15-yard outs like a Trey Burton, but he's going to run those more shallow routes, and he's going to finish the playoff for you. I mean, there was one play. I think he caught the ball maybe 5 yards from the last scrimmage and then got 10 more yards because he broke a tackle, and then he just finished off a run, put his head down, picked up a few more yards. So Doug Peterson will get creative with them. I mean, we've seen them run a lot of 3 tight end sets with Matt Tobin in the game, and you've seen how he can get creative with these misdirection screen plays like Trey Burton had in the Chicago game. So you're going to see, I think, just a lot of things you haven't seen before. And that's going to be the tough game planning thing is you have more film on Carson Wentz, but the Eagles still haven't fully rolled out their 3 tight end packages with Trey Burton and Brent Selleck and Zach Ertz.
I'll tell you, there's a lot of good going on, and a lot of it is, yes, the team has talent, but they have been coached very well, schemed very well, and that's not just Peterson. That's everywhere. I mean, Schwartz has done an excellent job with his defense, and I think it might have been you, Josh, but I saw a video of – it also illustrates, there's a play where – Dorial Green-Beckham, who didn't get a lot of credit for this, he's blocking 15, 20 yards down the field that really sprung the Sproles touchdown run that nobody really took notice of.
Yeah, I mean, and not only was he blocking like 20 yards downfield, but he was also blocking 60 yards downfield. I mean, that's how long this guy held on to his block, which, I mean, those types of plays, that's not about talent. That's just about effort and heart and what you're willing to do to make your team successful. And, I mean, that's one thing. Greg Lewis, I mean, that guy, he brings obviously not just a lot of experience, a lot of energy to that wide receiver room. And I think that one thing that Greg Lewis has been very good at is just instilling that passion, conveying these are the little things you guys need to do to be successful. And, without that Dorial Green-Beckham block, there's a pretty good chance that Darren Sproles doesn't score that touchdown. And when you have a guy, a wide receiver, holding a block that long, that far down the field, that's not something that you see every day.
Yeah, and there's so many other we could talk for 4 hours about some of the things in this game that as you tweeted out, the subtle little things like Wentz, the handoff to the left where he just sells it. The quarterback's selling that play goes left, and really it's misdirection going right. I mean, it's been really entertaining to watch that, and then of course read it at PhillyMag.com. Josh Paunil has the All-22. Thanks, buddy.
Thanks for having me, Mike.